And so as I started taking a look at the solution that I thought would work really well for people, just based upon what I was seeing, was why don't we make it available right inside of HighLevel? Why don't we use the custom menu link and put our system right there? So yes, you were logging into our software and using that, but we were marrying the two so you could at least stay in the same, like literally the same computer screen, right? Why not just provide the solution to this marketplace? It's clearly growing quickly. These guys are clearly doing something right.
Hey everyone, welcome to the High Level podcast called Spotlight Sessions, where we bring in subject matter experts from our ecosystem who are high level users to share their strategies, expertise, and what they have on the market to help you grow your high level business. Today's guest is Josh Knox, the co-founder of Noomerik. Josh specializes in helping agencies and SaaS businesses scale effectively with cutting edge payment technology. When it comes to the money, that's where the data and the decisions come in. So we want to make sure you have as much as you need to make sure you're making those strategic decisions about your high level operating system and what you do for your customers. With the focus on reducing payment costs here and Josh sharing the integration, the infrastructure, his years of experience is really going to give you a sense of what you need to do next, or maybe what you're not doing now. Josh, man, welcome to the show, man. It's we've been back and forth. We met at this event, Prospecting on Demand, the pod, a couple weeks back, and it was great to connect with you and meet with you. But I kind of knew about you from a distance because everyone's kind of talked about you in the group. So great to finally put an episode together with you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, look, I know you had a lot of friends here in this ecosystem, and you're a user and you're serving our high level agencies. But for those that don't know you yet, could you share a little bit about what attracted you to commit to the payments industry and serving high level agencies out of all platforms that are out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've spent my whole career in sales and marketing, and I had taken a sort of it was a contractor role with a payments company, a smaller family-run payments company, and they had their marketing was disparate, right? They had all different kinds of platforms, a lot of what HighLevel has in their main website, right? All the things that they can consolidate in the HighLevel platform, and found HighLevel in just working, doing some work for them and trying to consolidate for that for them. And that led me obviously to the HighLevel Facebook group. And so I just started watching and listening. And as I was doing some work for them, it became apparent that there were some challenges when it came to payments. And so just started looking at ways that we could potentially solve that problem. And what eventually happened was out popped an idea to build a software that we would integrate into HighLevel that would help people replace, the main provider in the system and help people that had lost their ability to take payment and cut costs at the same time. So that's really what led me to HighLevel was literally the Facebook group. After finding the software and taking a look at it and seeing what was possible, I bought an account and yeah, kind of just went from there, really.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that. And, because payments, depending on the listener, whether they're brand new or they've been with us for years, they may be new to the concept of I'll just use what is 1, 2, 3 click versus going through maybe some different processes, or maybe not hearing about something or a way to do something. And why go through that whole investigation process when I can, right, just do what everyone else says they're doing. And then more importantly, the whole like doing it right the first time, right? So we put this episode together for those that are just tuning in right now. It's called Leveling Up Payments for High Level Agencies. And what we're going to be talking about in these three pillars is one, why a payment strategy matters. Two is choosing the right tools. And then three is dealing with challenges. And because it can vary depending on if you're selling short, small subscriptions to long-term expensive subscriptions, money is money and there are rules around it. So if you can help us understand here, Josh, although this is not a super techie spotlight session, Why is it
Sure.
important for someone to tune in and have their ears wide open as what you unpack is coming up next?
Yeah, I mean it's important because without money come I mean money's the lifeblood of business, right? People will say cash is king. And when I say cash, I mean you got to have cash flow in your business to survive, or you've got to have a lot of capital on the background to survive, right? Lean times. And so understanding how money works is nearly as critical, in my opinion, as understanding how your marketing strategy works, how your technology works, right? You can have, I say this often when I get a chance to do these podcasts, you can literally have the best product on the planet. You can have the best website, the best team, everything books. Your AI is dialing it in while you're taking a shower, you're booking appointments, right? All this stuff that we hear, and then you can't take payment. That doesn't how business doesn't run that way, right? So even if you're in a mom and pop restaurant that's been owned for 50 years, you still have to have the ability to take payment for your product or service. And so understanding how money works, how payments work, is quite critical to your long-term success. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We also know you can have a really great offer and a terribly designed website, but because the offer works, then you sell the product, right? We've learned that marketing lesson over and over again. So it's really just thinking about everything that makes your business function. Having money coming through the door is about as foundational as it gets.
Absolutely. And I just to call out the playing field, right? Where we're at with
Sure.
different options and providers. Let's jump into pillar one here. And I would just to unpack pillar one, for those that may not look at it this same way, there are these service providers, without mentioning any names here, just in general, that you can go on the website, fill in your information, and get up and running. And they're typically quick. They require you to connect your bank account, and then that's it, right? You're up and going. There are also other ones where you can go to a bank or you can go to a company that sets things up based on the services you offer. For those that are probably wondering, what is he talking about? Could you just unpack like a little bit of a 101 when it comes to accepting online payments?
Yeah, so you're right. Obviously, there's lots of different providers out there. Some of them have been around for a decade or more. Some of them work online, some of them work in person, some of them do both. And the reality is at the end of the day, everybody, myself included, the ones that are super convenient, give me 5 pieces of info, start taking payment today. Every one of us has what's called a sponsor bank behind it. And I'm not going to go that much deeper than that. But that sponsor bank is the one that's approving those accounts, that's letting you as a business take money in the door for the product or service that you sell. And if you dive deep enough into that, sponsor banks all have risk appetites. It's just what it's called. And if the sponsor bank has a risk appetite for your type of business, right? Let's say you are an agency in HighLevel, which is what we specialize in. There are actually sponsor banks out there that want your business. They want to work with you. Whereas some of the other providers are moving away from that marketplace, which is really just a business decision. It doesn't mean you're running a bad business. It doesn't mean you can't sell what you want to sell. It is literally just a business decision on the sponsor bank side and the front end provider. So understanding just that piece of it helps you know that people actually do want to work with you, but they're all still doing the same thing. Even their PayFacs of the world. I'm just going to use that term, okay? Because that's some of the big three providers that we hear about, super easy to get involved with. Even they are doing underwriting on the back end. They're looking for certain amounts of information from you to make sure that you're an acceptable risk to them. Everybody has a risk profile. And if you're not, then they want to move on from it, and then you need to have another solution. So everybody's doing it. How they do it matters to you in the end as a business. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And for those that are international, um, there are deeper conversations that we can't get into right now
Yeah.
for time because and they also different rules and regulations. But as you get to know Josh and you get to know his business and you get to know the topic of what we're speaking about, you at least know where to go to ask more personalized questions around your use case. So, Josh, when we talk about agency accepting payments, terms and conditions, software as a service, marketing services, can we start to unpack maybe the mindset that a new or an experienced agency owner should have when accepting money from their customers?
Yeah, so I think we're talking about strategy here, right? We're talking about how this is just another part of your business and how you operate. I tell I tell the appropriate person when I get a chance to meet with them and we have a call with them, tell me a little bit about what you're doing, how much you're selling, that sort of thing. Depending upon where they're at in their business, I usually will say, look, I'm either really great for you or I think this solution might work really good for you while you're getting going. So if we're thinking about let's go really three stages. If we're thinking about the initial agency getting started, doing SaaS, maybe they're doing 10, 15,000 a month in revenue. They're getting going. They got their feet underneath them. Um, you want to think about lower cost in the business, right? Because HighLevel does such a good job of that. I think the last time I looked at you guys' homepage, it's HighLevel saving something like almost close to 8 grand now in software stuff that other people were duct taping before, right? And so as a business owner, you're trying to minimize costs, maximize revenue and profits, right? So as an initial business owner, there's a way to minimize that cost with some of these more convenient options that don't necessarily have a longer term or longer runway for you. Then you get into that medium-sized business that's doing 25, 50 a month, 75 a month. Now you're really starting to think about the strategy of what you're doing in the same way you would think about tax strategy, right? So if you're in the 10 to 15 range, at the end of the year, you're probably going to the CPA. Maybe you didn't carve out quite enough money to actually pay somebody to be a strategist because you weren't there yet, right? But when you start getting into those bigger numbers where you've got now a bigger team behind you, more going on, then you're looking at tax strategy. How do I limit that, right? We're doing the same thing with payments. And then, of course, the bigger businesses, 100K and beyond, really you're starting to think about how can I maximize my profits? Because as my business is starting to grow, then costs are going to start to increase, right? You're going to have more team members, more overhead, so on and so forth. When it comes to payments, we're thinking about that strategy up front. Are we looking at simply the most convenient option that moves the fastest, or are we thinking about actual buyer behavior? Will my buyers actually choose something different if I give them something different to choose, if that makes sense? So in our case, what our software does is it gives your or the agency owner's end customer the choice two ways to pay, right? Credit card or ACH, bank transfer, essentially. When you give that customer a choice, now you can introduce strategy for you pricing wise. And when customers have choice, they'll always choose what's most convenient for them and what's best for them in their mind, right? They're going to go with their own behavior. We all like airline miles. We all like rewards points. So when you think about it from that standpoint, that strategy incentivizes your customer to do one of two things, and they're still going to choose what's best for themselves. So that's really in a nutshell when I talk about strategy. Think about that as a business owner. And if I'm doing that and I incentivize them to pay one way versus the other way, can I then decrease my costs? And the answer is yes, quite a bit actually. So it's important. It's the same thing as, do I send this email headline? Do I have this headline on my website? Like payment strategy is a real thing because it uses buyer behavior to impact your bottom line.
Yeah. And as you start to, open up the brain waves on how you explain this, and you relate it to what everyone is passionate about when they're using HighLevel and serving their customers is the technical, the strategic marketing end of things. What's going to get them to get customers in the door based on, that company hiring the agency to be the expert. And that's exactly why now I start to think of it this way now. So if I understand what my tax strategy is based on the products that I have, and I start to determine, do I need to offer ACH for larger services or services that maybe potentially, if somebody were to charge it back, it could have a big big issue on my business.
Yeah.
I can now package these with the incentives you said. I could stack offer this so that way it's worth it to them
Yeah.
versus them just putting it on a credit card with maybe the potential of them charging it back. I want to touch on chargebacks a little bit because that's typically from what I've heard and seen is almost becomes the red flag of why an account may be considered to be paused, funds to be held, or even disqualified from using a service. When it comes to today, if you have an example or two or some experience you could share, when it comes to the agreement online, when it comes to the IP, when it comes to IP address, signing something, the wording to prevent a chargeback or to best position the relationship as a two-way relationship, not just a sign and drive and no
Right.
refund allowed. How do we start to look at things with that strategy in mind?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So chargebacks. I like to explain chargebacks this way. It's in the context of payments. It's like your credit score. Whether you make on-time payments, how much you utilize your credit, all of that impacts your credit score, right? Chargebacks are one of those things that impacts your merchant account, if you will. And they're frustrating. Let's just be honest about it. They're incredibly frustrating. In some cases, people are actually committing fraud by charging back because they knew they bought your service, you provided the service, and they still initiated the chargeback. And so, what we've learned in my experience is how fast you deal with it and how you approach it is makes all the difference, right? So I'm going to use a real world example, right? Costco and Nordstrom. They're pretty much like, hey, just bring the product back and we'll give you a refund. They've learned over the years, I don't want the headache. Just bring it back and we'll give you your money back and you be on your way, right? Now, does that work for everybody? No, those are multi-billion dollar businesses. I'm not suggesting to everybody listening to this just refund money if you've delivered a service. What I'm suggesting is what you communicate to your clients and how you handle that difficulty makes all the difference. I've had clients go as far as taking people to court for a chargeback and winning, but do you want to go that route or do you want to just refund? It's a very personal, a very business decision. Chargebacks at the end of the day are controlled by the cards, right? Not the banks, not you, not me, not the payment providers, not the PayFacs that we're talking about. The customer that you take payment from has their own individual relationship with their Visa card, with their MasterCard, right? And when they make a complaint, then Visa or MasterCard has to respond to that complaint. And who are they going to take care of? This is just illogical, right? Who are they going to take care of more? Their cardholder who they want to make a payment every month so that balance doesn't default, or you, the merchant. Does that make sense? Like,
Absolutely. And I feel like it's so important to break it down to at this introductory level because not everybody quite understands that. It's,
yeah,
you know, we can go so many different directions. I'm trying to stay in a controlled environment because,
sure.
you know, this is a fun conversation when you've been through a little bit of it or you've seen stories around and you're like, oh man, I want to prevent people from going through that because if you do it this way, you have a better chance of, right, doing good
Yeah.
business. So when it comes to the example you gave, and those clear terms, if somebody were to be a customer of yours, right, working with you versus the sign and drive and the risk of your account being shut down out of nowhere, could you share the difference between working with a fast get you up and running versus somebody who's working with you like yourself and others in your industry that are like coaching you and guiding you,
Yeah.
almost like that hands-on service of this is the policy, here's why it helps you in the long run.
Yeah. Okay. So, a payment facilitator, the big three, we all know their names. And by the way, I'm not a hater in any way. Clearly, they've done brilliant things. Their technology is amazing, right? But they have a particular risk factor that they're willing to accept. They're willing to go up to, right? And once that threshold is reached, which is really low comparatively speaking to what we do, then yeah, they just really have no choice. They've got to close you down, hold more money, 50% of it, whatever, right? Tie you up because their internal mechanisms with their banks, their sponsor banks say you have to do this. We're not interested in keeping that in payments. It's a portfolio, right? I don't want to corrupt the whole portfolio by a handful of these people. It's almost like blacklisting an email address, right? A domain. So if you think about a mail gun in that regard, right? Everybody's sort of on the same, and then you've got a bad actor in there, it causes problems. And so they don't want to cause problems for the whole portfolio. So it's more cost effective for them long term, literally just logically thinking about it to go, it's not good for our business. We got to move away from that. So that brings me back to what I said before. There are banks, the banks that we work with, that want your business. They have a higher threshold, a higher tolerance because they know that's what business you're in. They know chargebacks are a reality. Let's everybody just be honest about it. And there are bad buyers out there. And they're going to do dumb things. And that shouldn't impact your business long term when you know you're providing a good product. So the PayFacs generally will operate in the 1% or below margin on chargebacks. I'm not advocating this. I want to be very clear about this. But I have clients that do 5 and 10% chargeback rate every month. And they keep operating because the bank knows that that business is working on solving that. And also, that's part of business. You cannot go your entire life and not upset a customer, right? It just happens. And so, why punish you for that? Why not just build a system, again, the banks that we work with, that allows you to have that growth space, right? Now, if you continue to run into a problem, then you could run into a problem with the bank that we work with. And all the time I've been doing this, I've had one out of hundreds and hundreds of clients. Now that we've switched over, now we've got actually more than 1,000 in our system. I've had one. And it just, anyways, what I'm saying is there's a lower threshold on the technology convenience factor, right? Those that let you get going just like that. And so it just puts you in a bad spot as a business. It's just risky, right? And especially the more that you grow. So
Yeah, I see you're biting your tongue, right? Because there's so much that can be unpacked here, and
sure.
we can literally go in a spiral, and the chats can go on fire. And for those of you that are tuning in live, thank you for tuning in. Keep the questions coming. We'll do our very best to embed these answers to these questions as we can, but there'll be more responses coming here shortly. And if you're not a high level user yet, there'll be a link below. And when we do these types of spotlight sessions, it's to help our high level users be fully prepared. So what you're tuning into now is well worth to go to the beginning if you're just jumping in. So as we wrap up this first pillar here, Josh, could you give us 3 action steps to start to train the mind for the newbie, and maybe give like a little bit of a wake up call for the experienced user with payment strategy and high level?
Yeah. So for the newbie, well, you could really see how, I'm not going to make this political, but you could really see how somebody in politics could not answer a question, because when a lot of questions come at you, you're trying to remember all the questions. So for a newbie, really focus on getting your feet underneath you, getting your processes in place, getting everything dialed in so that as you grow, you can transition into a strategy that helps you scale, right? Thinking about keeping costs low in the beginning while you build, build, build. And then for the long-term person, what I want them to think about is, do you really want to risk 50K a month, 100K a month over convenience when you can build in the right infrastructure, the right strategy with what we do to really help you long-term? I'm literally talking about a way that you would never, ever worry about ever losing the ability to take payment. We can build it in such a way that that never becomes a reality for you. I mean, you would literally have to commit fraud to then not have a business, right? Which is a totally different conversation. So for newbie, focus on getting your feet underneath you and then looking into how that long-term strategy works and how you can make that migration over to a platform like ours. And for the existing person, do you really want to risk that? What happens if you lose the ability to take cash? Can you survive for the next 30 days? Can you pay your team? Can you pay your contractors? Can you keep providing the service and support that you want to provide if you don't have any money coming in the door? So that's what I would tend to tell people to think about.
Yeah, and I appreciate you just leveling with us here, because You could wake up tomorrow and something could change based on not being proactive and prepared, and no payments will come in, even though you're offering a service. And there's so much implication there after that. So as we get into this second pillar here of choosing the right tools and really incorporating the strategies into now action items, recently, you guys have set up within our app, in our app store, our app marketplace. You
Yep.
could search it by Noomerick,
IK, no C.
IK. So IK, thank you for that. And there'll be some information below, but tell us about why you invested and why you really went all in on that integration, seamless feeling outside of it just being there, helping your business and also helping high levelers not have to kind of go on a hunt.
Yeah, really, it's to really follow the high level. I'm going to call it a mantra. You guys might not call it that, but everything about high level is simplifying the agency's uh, tool set, right? Making that tech stack live in one nice cohesive environment, ecosystem as you're calling it. And so as we got started, I think I've been in the high level Facebook group for almost 5 years. As I started using high level as a tool and being in the Facebook group and listening to people, there was this constant back and forth of, okay, I've got to go into my other platform and I've got to do XYZ. And then I've got to go back into high level and then I got to do ABC, right? And so as I started taking a look at the solution that I thought would work really well for people, just based upon what I was seeing, was why don't we make it available right inside of high level? Why don't we use the custom menu link and put our system right there? So yes, you were logging into our software and using that, but we were marrying the two so you could at least stay in the same, like literally the same computer screen, right? And then the other reason was watching what the agencies were dealing with and having a background in marketing and sales. I don't know, it was just sort of like, why not just provide the solution to this marketplace? It's clearly growing quickly. These guys are clearly doing something right. So, maybe it was the fact that I was in my mid 40s at the time and I was like, why don't we just stop trying to reinvent the wheel here and give people what they want to have, right? So that's ultimately what led us to do what we're doing, which is build a tool that could replace what was existing, especially for those that were really challenged and got canceled, and then make that tool really accessible, really ingrained, if you will, at the time. Now, as high level is gotten better and better at their UI on payments, we've moved back and refocused more on the engine of payments, right? That infrastructure piece. So it was again just to be succinct and right inside of the high level tool, to be honest with you.
What you had just mentioned was, early on there wasn't these in-app features to send invoices as clean and clear, to be as detailed. So the right tools has everything to do with having the right way your customer expects to buy, but
Yep.
also without having to do it manual each time. With these advancements in high level from that functionality part, could you share a little bit about what you're seeing are maybe tools that you're either developing, creating, perfecting as the demand from high level users is becoming more and more clear on where they're going from a, say, SaaS direction or traditional marketing when it comes to tracking and protection of the commitment that these people are these customers are paying online. Are there some features there that say, well, we got this, we get that for you, so that way you can protect, what you're providing, prevent that fraud.
Yeah. Initially we were adding features almost as fast as they were coming up in the high level group, people asking for stuff. And initially we were actually able to stay ahead of high level. It was like a little pride point for me. I could try and stay ahead of the curve, if you will, with the way the high level team was going, not because they couldn't do it, but because there were some different priorities and because I was so nimble, I could just move a bit faster, right? And then there came this crossover point where the UI and high level got so phenomenal we took a look at what we were doing and said, you know what, we're going to really focus on this infrastructure piece. So, to your question, we're watching exactly what's going on in the group and the tools that people are asking for. And then noticing, just like HighLevel would, how are they using them? What are they using them for? When I have somebody come talk to me about working with us, one of the very first questions I ask them, if not the first question, is I literally say to them, how are you taking payment? Are you doing a sales call? Are they landing on your website? Are they going to AI? What are you doing? And when I listen to that, there's really a couple of very basic ways that they're taking payment because agencies are offering such, in a lot of ways, such a custom service for somebody, right? Um, that they want to have that conversation with their end user or their client. And so as we started listening to that, we started recognizing the HighLevel tool was catching up dramatically and making leaps and bounds on what it could do. And now they've got POS features and all that really great stuff. And so we were like, you know what, let's get back to the fundamentals. And and so as we looked at getting back to the fundamentals, that question that I ask is even more important. How are you taking payment? How are you taking payment? How are you taking payment? Because it's them, they've got a sales team or all these things that are happening, but they're really only doing one of three things. And so as we looked at that, we backed off from the tool build, right? The feature set, if you will, and again looked to the infrastructure, the what in the industry we call them the bank rails, right? The payment rails. So that's led us to where we are today. And I'm not going to tease anything here, but we're working on some really cool things that make what we're doing now so much more powerful for using HighLevel as the payments UI and tool moving forward.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on some examples here, maybe some types of industries that our audience may be serving. When it comes to the right tools for agencies that are serving restaurants, comes to demand of like tap to pay or catering orders versus your regular what you would see on a screen where you tap and kind of on the run kind of orders. Could you share a little bit about um, how do you monetize and how do you educate yourself and your team being the trusted agency to say, hey, look, these are things that you should be aware of to collect payments smarter or to to even offer it.
Yeah. So in payments, like I said before, everything's based on risk, right? From the bank side. The lower the risk, the higher the margin. And so if we're talking about restaurants, then you're looking at the in-person tool, right? The point of sale device, the POS. I hate that it's called POS. We all know the other acronym for that, but a point of sale device, right? You said you knew me as a joker in the beginning, and I love to have a good laugh. Um, so you want to look at that if you're offering that service because in restaurants is such a unique one. I'm glad you asked that question. It's such a unique environment because in a restaurant you have all of these. Oh shoot, the term just left my mind. I worked in a restaurant. You have modifications. You have all these modifications if you're working in a restaurant. I'm not talking about you walk to the counter and you order the one thing. I'm talking about you sit down in the restaurant, the server comes to the table, and there's always somebody. I worked in a really famous restaurant. We had celebrity after celebrity walk through the door, and they always wanted something not on the menu, man. They just did. I don't know why. But you have these modification things, and so the software itself's got to do the heavy lifting there, right? And now that we've got custom objects and HighLevel, and I'm getting a little bit off on a tangent here with payments, but your question is valuable because at the end of the day, in that environment, that restaurant needs so much functionality in the software that the point of sale device almost becomes a little bit secondary to what the software piece can do because taking a payment versus modifying an order for a table of five that's got five entrees and two desserts and three appetizers is mind-bogglingly software-wise, right? But at the end, it's literally just a tap a card, swipe a payment. So when you're thinking about that from the restaurant standpoint, it just comes down to the device and how simple you can make it for the server or the receptionist to take payment, depending upon the restaurant type. Does that make
Yeah, and
sense?
it does. And the modification point is I'm glad you touched on that because right everything has a fee assigned to it. It's not just, hey, let's just give that to them for free. Everything's assigned to it. There's a profit margin, there's a cost of goods. The big picture here is that everything's got a dollar or cent to it. So to what I'm gathering here is if somebody has clients in the restaurant industry, they may be thinking about working with somebody based on the commercial they see or the coolness of the tool,
Yep.
where you, as the agency expert, it should be more about how do you plan on collecting custom payments, and tell me a little bit about your menu, and tell me a little bit about the types of orders you get frequently versus what you might need to modify. And I think that's the biggest part I want to drive home here is that, with HighLevel, we have our community. And with other products that are community driven, there are experts that are in those communities too. And
Yeah.
I think that it's not just about buying the product, it's who comes along with the product.
Yeah.
Who are the users? So I appreciate you sharing that. Yes, there's, I see it all the time. So I want the white one and the one that I could put in three different locations and be off to go. It's not about the toy,
Yeah.
it's the batteries that keep the toy running. And you mentioned custom objects and all these different elements, and they're here because of that demand.
Yeah, you brought up like I worked in a restaurant, like I said, right? It's the restaurant business is crazy competitive. I did a MBA program, and one of the class was we got to pick a massive organization, and I picked a food and beverage one. I picked Starbucks. They had like a 8% profit margin or less. So it's so competitive, right? So when you think about it from just a payment standpoint, you're taught as an agency, you're talking to a business that has incredibly tight margins that is literally trying to find cost savings anywhere they can. And then you're competing. Now I'm talking about high level agencies competing against the big boys. Toast is the big boy out there, right? Like my wife and I went out last week. It was the server put a Toast product in front of me. I'm like, freaking Toast. And that device has made it so, I'm just gonna say it, lazy for servers to do their job. They literally just walk, they don't do anything. They just walk around with that device and punch it in. When I served tables, I wrote it down. I went in the back, typed it into the micros. I had to remember everything. I had to do all. So now you're competing as an agency owner with a multi-billion-dollar device corporation. Don't even worry about the payment side of it just yet. The device piece of it is crazy because they've made it so ridiculously simple for a person literally to walk around and go, okay, you'll take this. They don't have to walk into the kitchen. They don't even leave you when they take the card anymore. It's like, hey, here's my tip thing. They started at 20%. You're like, what if you did a terrible job? Right? Anyways,
Whenever
so
you had, if you weren't good at math, you had a chance to at least do the calculation. Now it's
right.
like pick one of three and that's it. You're like, oh, what? You have like tip remorse by the time you leave. Like,
It's crazy, right? It's just crazy. So
I'd like to talk
um
about here. I'd like just to as we wrap this pillar up here, home services. We have a handful. We have a good amount of agencies that serve home service industries, right? And
yep.
collecting financing and payments for roofing jobs or for bigger AVO, bigger cost of services. Maybe ACH makes more sense for the homeowner versus putting it on the credit card if they have that right income available to do so. Could you talk about how the right tools to support that industry to make a difference than putting them just on a quick 1, 2, 3 sign up and we'll get you integrated right away?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. We have quite a few home service clients, and it comes down to that same question I asked: how are you taking payment? This last year, this last 18 months in my own personal home, we've had to replace the furnace and the air conditioner. We've been here for almost 20 years, so it was time. And I've watched two different people come in and bid me the job and then how they took payment, right? And so I'm very aware of how they're doing it and how many freaking touches they have to go on their iPad just to get me to make a payment, right? Even if it's just, hey, it's a $50 service fee to come out to give you the bid to tell you, right? And so when I talk to my service clients, it's literally, what are you doing? To walk me through what you're doing in the house, right? Because there are great softwares out there, Service Titan, House Call Pro, all these things that HighLevel can now compete with that have these really great feature sets. And at the end of the day, the business still just needs to take a payment, right? So what we've learned for our clients is just make it as simple as possible. Stop trying to make everything so freaking complicated. Quite honestly, again, this is just me being 100% transparent because when I talk to people, they're like, what if I give them a 16 pay, but I do it over 10 months? And so I've got to take it every 3 weeks and I want them to be able. And I'm like, look, just simplify your life. And are you going to take it in a payment link or are you going to take it on an invoice? If you're going to take it on an invoice, do you need to take partial payment? Do you want to take full payment? Just make it one or the other, 50% or 100%. And the more I've done that, the more I can see the gears turning for people, and they go, "Yeah, that really is a lot simpler for us." Because still, at the end of the day, what you need to do is take the payment. You got to get paid for your service. Why overcomplicate it?
And I think just in that piece of advice there alone, someone may not understand the reasoning or the clue, but reduce your risk of waiting for the cash to be collected. If you give too many options, they may not make it to the fifth payment out of
Yeah.
10. So, three payments, two payments, or one, or finance it. You have a financing partner, and those are
Yeah.
around more and more and more to do so. You still get paid, right?
Yeah.
But it's how you position it, that strategy, and that the partners that you collaborate with make that a possibility.
Yeah, let me get back to that roofing example because I've talked to quite a few roofers about this, right? A lot of roofs actually get replaced by insurance money. So you have somebody go, I forget the term, but you have somebody go out, they do the assessment or whatever, they submit it to insurance. Insurance will say how much they're going to pay for, then the bid comes in, and I'm not getting that right. So the roofers out there don't get upset at me, but um, that person might still pay in full on a card because now they've gotten an insurance check and they get the airline miles on the card, right? But you've given the two options to do it. So some people will have the cash, some people are going to get financed, and some people are going to have the insurance piece. I know personally, if I'm doing big home projects and I've got the cash, I'll still put it on the card. Again, airline miles, right? And people really like agencies really need to understand how motivated buyers are by credit card reward points. It is an incredibly powerful motivator. So getting back to that piece and offering the different things. Yes, you want to give the multiple options, but understand what's ultimately motivating that buyer on how they're going to pay you.
And with accepting money comes the risk. And this third pillar that we're going to touch on right now is dealing with the challenges. Could you come across some common pain points of the different challenges in your experience, that you could share when it comes down to the account shutdown, the failed transactions, the high international fees, the GDPR, these different elements that you need to be aware of, or at least partner with a company or a group of people that are like-minded to say, hey, look, this is what I've been through, or this is where you can kind of get the law of the land before
Yeah.
you just say, I'm opening for business.
Yeah. So we're talking about a couple of things here. We're talking about strategy and we're talking about infrastructure. So let me talk about the infrastructure piece first because that speaks to the overall risk of what you're doing. Those doing lower volumes, you're going to have basically one provider. Those doing higher volumes, my clients, I recommend you have multiple providers because I can stack those providers on top of one another and essentially create a 4 or 5 lane highway for money for you, right? If one lane has an accident in it, we can still route traffic through the other 4 lanes. You keep going while you fix lane 5, right? So the challenges that people are facing with account shutdown is risk, right? We talked about that in the beginning. And that you want to work with somebody that wants your risk profile. There's plenty of them, right? We work with 12 different sponsor banks on our side that want that business. So that's item number one with account shutdown. And then item number two is what I just said, stacking multiples, right? It's the inverse of adding multiple credit cards to your wallet. That increases your purchasing power, where when you stack multiple banks, that increases your acceptance power, right? Your volume. So that's one piece. The other piece with when it comes to failed payments is how you are as a business, right? So even the big three have trouble with failed payments. I just had this conversation with a good client yesterday. People probably don't notice, but I'm going to say it. Over the holidays, payments start declining more, right? Because people are out spending more money on their cards, aren't necessarily paying attention to the balance. Maybe the payment it's literally crossing in the mail. I made a payment, but my balance is too high. And so you'll see a little bit more failed payments as you get to the holidays, but you'll tend to see failed payments because people simply don't know that their bank have fraud protections in place that are automated for you as a consumer. And let me give you a very personal example. I have a national bank that me and my wife run our finances, our personal finances through. About 18 months ago, maybe 24 months ago now, she bought Chick-fil-A lunch, right? $15 or something like that. And the bank flagged it as fraud. A debit card for $15, in-person payment. She called, went through the whole thing that every bank does for you. Give me your social, tell me this, tell me that. What's your blood type? Do you believe in unicorns? The whole thing. And the bank's like, great, that's you. It's still fraud, so we're going to shut down your debit card. Wait, what? How do you have the power to do that? It's my money, it's my account. Well, it looked like fraud, even though it was Chick-fil-A and you just verified everything with us. So we're going to shut down your debit card. Can I get a new one? No. So my wife did not have a debit card for a year, right? I haven't switched banks yet. That's a whole other story. But there are these things that are in place at the bank level that minimizes their risk too. Because every time you spend money, there is some amount of risk associated with it. If it's on a credit card, it's higher risk. If it's on a debit card, it's lower risk, right? It's very simple. And so as a business, you're trying to do everything you can to provide the most amount of information to your consumer and to the bank who is letting your consumer spend money with you. And the more you can do that, the better off you're going to be in avoiding those fraud charges or those declined or failed payments because it's simply information. Sometimes it takes a phone call from your customer to the bank. Sometimes it goes through on the second try. International ones are a little bit different, but every card has different varying levels of what they're willing to risk on initial purchases or subscriptions because it just comes with risk. And so sometimes it can be hard. It can be frustrating as a business owner. But the reality is everybody in HighLevel is living in a digital world. That means the card's not present when the payment's made, which means the risk is elevated. Plain and simple. Does that make sense?
It does, and now we that was a mic drop moment right there. We're living in a digital world where the card is not present, and that brings the risk right away because the CVV code is not being asked every time, right? Unless you have the tools or the partnership with the software company or you're doing that, that becomes a requirement. If you're not using the signature pad and that's not associated with the right tracking mechanism, then the signature is not even valid anyway. And I know we can get too deep in the weeds here, and by no means am I this expert or this advice giver in this particular field, but as a consumer and being also want to accept money from people, like these are things I look at as a consumer and how I try to stay proactive as a merchant, right? Someone that's exchanging value for service for revenue. When it comes to AI and AI, many people are adopting it in many different ways, but how are the different sponsored banks, the issuing credit cards, banking cards, how are they determining how AI works these days, and how does it affect you as a merchant or somebody that is right accepting money for service? What should you be aware of with AI?
So let me ask a clarifying question. I hate to answer a question with a question. Are
Mhm.
you asking from the standpoint of are the banks using AI to validate information for a merchant, or are you asking are banks wondering about the tool of AI that agencies or others might be selling as a service?
I'm glad you asked that because that opened up a whole other reason for us to jump on another episode together here. So I think, to kind of meet you in the middle here, what information or what precautions should I be taking with AI being a decision factor in maybe how my chargeback is approved or declined? Should I be getting a copy of someone's license to say, hey, AI, you're wrong? Or should I be getting signatures on stuff? Or should I be paying for a different service to grab IP addresses based on that transaction? Like, what are you seeing to be proactive from maybe more of the experienced user that may be getting maybe that not so uh,
Yeah.
trustworthy customer right off the bat?
That's a great question. So there's a couple of things that you can think about, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily AI driven, but maybe we can use that term. So the more information you can collect from a customer, the better off you're going to be, right? So you mentioned IP address, we collect that in our system. You can collect a signature, and HighLevel, you can collect a signature. You can collect one of the big determining factors is your zip code, right? And we have what's called AVS, address verification service. So if you're collecting that and the address and that verifies, so the card matches the zip code on the card, right? Which is sometimes to do on difficult to do on a stolen card, but not impossible. Then you can start to reduce the risk. But then the question becomes, am I increasing the friction for the buyer, right? So there's a fine balance there. I would tend to say the more information, because I want you to have the least amount of risk as a business so you can be better at fighting chargebacks if they do come in. If you've collected John Smith and he's in Hoboken, New Jersey at 1234 Main Street and the zip code matched, and he signed the document that said he was totally willing to buy, right? And there are people listening to this going, yeah, but they still were able to charge back. That's right. But what we're still trying to do is lower the risk of that happening. And so it's not necessarily an AI thing. It's something that's been in the payment space for a while. Is the more information I can collect, the better off I'll be, right? Which is what led us to EMV stuff and the chips and the whole deal. It's still risky to take a credit card payment at the end of the day.
Yeah. And it's funny, I was just, I've heard stories where somebody will be complaining, oh, this company has their own payment system, like a Walmart. They have their own payment system. They don't accept Apple Pay. And there's these different strategies that these companies use for many different reasons. But I appreciate you going in depth for our agencies, as you being a high-level user, running your company on it, but also more importantly, being part of the ecosystem. It really just helps to, right? It's like a quick fireside chat. It's like, us going out and you see on my shirt, I see, oh, you're on HighLevel, me too. It's just that you understand the pain, the process, and maybe the overthinking somebody may be doing when it comes to running their business outside of any other platform. Josh, thank you for hanging out with me, man, and for
Oh, you
really
bet.
taking these questions and just unpacking it as raw as you can without tippy toeing around or giving us riddles and problem solving and contact me or click below to get the real answer.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you for
just
just kind
ask.
of letting it all out, man. I appreciate that. And our audience appreciates it too, based on the comments and what they're doing. Um, Josh, any closing remarks as we put this episode and move on to the rest of what we got ahead of us here today?
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I would say is whether you talk to me or somebody else in the payment space, just get educated, understand how money works. And that will do a lot for you as a business owner long term. You don't need to understand the entire complexity about payments and interchange tables and sponsor banks and acquiring banks and issuing, like, you don't need to know that. But what would be good for you is to really get educated on how money works, the risk involved, and why it's not okay to just take $10,000 in payment for whatever you want from whenever you want from whoever you want, right? There's a risk associated with it. The more that you, as an agency and a business owner, understand how that money flows into your business, the better off you'll be long term, whether you talk to me or somebody else about it.
Yeah. Thank you for that, for those closing remarks there. If you have questions, comment below, share your feedback. If you have an aha moment, if something that you listened to said, I never thought of it like that, let us know below. Because this stuff, this allows us to kind of give you a clear path as we bring on more and more guests and we understand what your true pain points are. We can get you solutions from those in the community. Josh, man, thank you again. Thank you to our audience. Till next time, we'll be back.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.